Okay, if you've been following any of our gear coverage on topics like long-range shooting, crossbows, thermal optics, or live-scope sonar, you know that hunting and fishing technology is getting pretty dang sophisticated. The same thing is happening with trail cameras. Today, hunters can hang and run cameras that are much more affordable, less glitchy, and more versatile than ever before. In fact, trail camera tech is getting so good that manufacturers, and by extension we hunters, are approaching real-time imagery. That has huge implications for all hunters, but especially deer hunters. I'm Executive Editor Natalie Krebs, and today on the podcast, I'm talking to Editor-in-Chief Alex Robinson about his latest trail camera test. In this episode, we're going to cover exactly how he's been testing these cameras, what he's learned about them, and the responsibility that comes with all this powerful new tech. So, Alex, you have been testing trail cameras for several years now, both as a regular deer hunter, but also with some really dedicated gear testing. So how have you been doing this testing?
Yeah, I have been testing trail cameras, I'd say more consistently and objectively for about 3 years. And, the reason in here is the trail camera category for outdoor life is a really important one. Lots of our readers use trail cameras. And on top of that, it is an interesting category in terms of technology. There's just a lot of evolution, new cameras coming out, new technology. It's kind of it's just a growing, interesting category. So about 3 years ago, our gear editor, Scott Einsman, and I just went about calling in to manufacturers and requesting all the major trail cameras that we could find. So we called in cell cams and standard cams. We requested like the top end, super expensive models, a bunch of cheap stuff off of Amazon, and we put it through a very straightforward field testing protocol. And what we did is kind of started with a basic walkthrough test. And what that is just set the camera up on a tripod. And I did this in my backyard. Set the camera up on a tripod and walk past it from the right to left, left to right at 3 different distances. So I did this at 10 feet, 60 feet, and 110 feet. The reasoning for those distances is to kind of challenge the camera, I guess I would put it. It's actually kind of hard for a camera to capture an object passing by it very closely. So that's the 10-foot distance. The 60-foot is kind of a layup. That should be easy. That's like 20 yards. Cameras, all decent cell cameras should be able to pick up a person or a deer walking by them at 60 feet. And then the 110-foot mark, that is actually beyond the range of what some cameras even advertise they can capture images, especially at night. A lot of the like no glow cameras will have an advertised range of 80 feet, but we just said 110 because that's kind of the long distance range that some cameras advertise they can capture images. So we wanted to test that and see. So yeah, in doing this walkthrough test, we just kind of walk by the camera at I'd say a steady pace that's about the pace of a rutting buck kind of tromping down a trail, not in a hurry, but just on a line, kind of knows where he's going. And then when that walkthrough test is done, we look at all the photos gathered from all the cameras and look for image quality. So is the tester walking by the camera? Is their image blurry? Is the camera able to stop motion? And I should say we do this test during the day and at night. So we also evaluate for nighttime images. Are you able to see details around the tester? And then we also evaluate for just basic performance and accuracy. So like, is the camera missing captures at 10 feet? Is it able to capture at the long distance range of 110 feet? And we just kind of mark all that down and keep score for each camera and see how it performs in this kind of objective test. And then after that, we just hang the cameras in the field and run them, as any hunter would. Start in the summertime. I have a deer hunting lease in Wisconsin. Just hang the cameras out there and see how they perform, see how they do.
Yeah, and that all makes sense. And I guess I would say before we go too much further, you're not particularly tech savvy, right? So like this sounds pretty technical, but I think what you're talking about, your average deer hunter can relate to.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out, Natalie. I am, as you say, not very tech savvy. Yeah. Of all the Outdoor Life editors, I was probably the last one of us to get a smartphone. I have trouble keeping my software on my computer updated. I often send you questions like IT questions about like, oh, I can't charge my computer. What's going on? So, I'm 36 years old, but probably have the technology competency of maybe like a 50-year-old-ish range. So I guess the point there is I'm not some like tech whiz. So I'm also approaching all of these cameras with a very kind of average grasp of modern technology, and they should be easy to use. Ease of use is a big deal with trail cameras. So we're definitely putting that metric to the test in our review of trail cameras.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's fair. That's a fair way to test trail cameras. Can Alex use them? Okay, so what you've gathered a lot of data and a lot of experience with these cameras. What are some of the key takeaways that you've noticed so far?
Okay, yeah. So over the course of 3 years, the first and most obvious thing that I have noticed is that all of these cameras are susceptible to failure and glitches. And some of this, I'll admit, like I was saying before, some of this is user error of not exactly knowing how to use the technology properly. But honestly, most of it is just the nature of the cameras themselves. Almost all of these cameras are made overseas, in China, Vietnam. The only camera that we've tested that was made in the US is Reconyx, and that camera is quite a bit more expensive, more than twice as expensive as, the average other camera. But it actually had a failure. It ran for one season, and we had major issues with fog, moisture, condensation building up inside the body of the camera. So, every brand of camera that I've used so far has had some type of issue, whether, the biggest one would just be a major catastrophic failure where the camera just dies. Well, hell, I was riding in a 4-wheeler with you, and your box of trail cameras almost caught on fire.
It did, yeah. It didn't almost, like it started smoking. Yeah. There was an electrical fire.
Yeah, it was about to catch on fire. We had to throw it out of the side-by-side. So, yes, the point, I guess, is that these cameras, while they can deliver really excellent performance and really useful hunting information, none of them are like battle proof. None of them, in my experience, will last more than, I'll put it this way. If you can get 3 seasons out of a trail camera of, running it hard, having it out there nonstop, that would be very good. I'd be impressed with that. Another thing that I will say on the positive side about doing all these tests is the cell cam apps and ease of use have really improved in the last couple of years. All of these cameras are super easy to set up. All the apps are really intuitive. It's very easy to buy a cell cam, download the app, link up your app to your camera and set it and start getting pictures right away, even for me.
How much change have you seen even within the last 3 years? Like, is stuff changing, improving year over year, or is you're really comparing a lot of the improvements that you've seen, to 5 or 6 years ago?
Yeah, it's changing year over year. The big change is like live cam technology. So I'm talking about a live video feed from your trail camera. That sounded cool a few years ago, but was not available. It's starting to be available in a couple cameras now, but in our testing, we've seen that it's not really ready for prime time. Even some of the cameras that, really advertise this feature, it doesn't deliver what you would want it to. In other words, a consistent live feed. For example, the Bushnell Cellcore live camera, it would not connect to the app to provide a live video feed, even in places like even in my yard where I'm getting 2 bars of service. It just wouldn't connect and provide a live feed. Kind of on the fringes of the market are these security cameras that do provide live feeds, and some folks are starting to kind of experiment with those as trail cameras for hunting. So Scott tested a bunch of those, and he found that even the best do have a delay, and many of them are just not built. They're just not built to the specs or durability standards that you would need for a camera to be useful to a deer hunter. Like, they're not going to survive an entire hunting season out in the field, out in the woods, and be able to deliver that live update. So the live and kind of on-demand video is emerging, but it's not quite ready yet. That's the newest thing we're seeing. And we can talk about this later or a little bit later in the podcast, but in some ways I'm kind of glad that's the case. Like, there's some serious ethical issues, I think, around the live video from your trail camera, but I can quit rambling and we can tackle that part in the second half of the podcast.
Yeah, let's definitely come back to that. And real fast before we move on, when you talk about security cameras, you're talking about like the stuff that you might have like a doorbell camera or like on your garage, stuff that's connected to Wi-Fi? Or are you talking about something that is connected to cellular data that Scott's been experimenting with?
They're both. There are both options out there, and they come in pretty affordable, even cheap packages in Amazon that will connect to Wi-Fi or will work through a cellular network. So obviously the cell cams are much more practical to deer hunters. And yeah, there's a lot of kind of odd, I guess I would say cheap pop-up brands that are starting to be kind of intriguing for deer hunting purposes, but probably not ready, not there yet.
Can you identify like what the ceiling on trail camera tech is? It seems almost like a lot of trail camera, like the actual technology of like the lenses, the megapixels, all the stuff built in the actual camera lags really far behind our everyday technology. What is preventing a lot of this technology that we're almost there, but we're not quite there? What's going on?
I'm guessing that it's probably just a factor of cost. Like, if you wanted to build, again, I would say a lot of the, even the popular cameras we have now that are known for, high performance, they're built in Asia. Most of them are, made in China. So if you wanted to make a really high quality, highly durable, live action camera that would survive a season in the fall and winter of northern Wisconsin, that's going to be too expensive I would imagine that's going to be too expensive for the everyday deer hunter. Because remember, a lot of us, one trail camera is not enough. We need a dozen of these things. We want a dozen of these things out there. So I think you see a lot of cameras now in the kind of $150, $100 to $150 range, even the cell cams. I think that's a pretty good deal, but you got to add the plan on top of that. I think practically speaking, that is the performance level that deer hunters are willing to pay for right now. That's kind of what we're getting. Yeah,
that makes sense. Okay, well, tell me about the cameras that you were impressed by, like knowing that there's still a few limitations. Like what were the big winners in your testing?
Okay, so there's three cameras that I'm really excited about that are new for this year. The first, just from a performance standpoint, is the Tacticam Pro 3.0, and this is the Reveal camera under Tacticam, and Reveal is relatively new. It's only a couple years old, but they've made a really good name for themselves among deer hunters as being just a reliable camera that shoots really nice quality photos. And the new Pro, the Pro 3.0, definitely lives up to that history. Major improvements are that it will link to any major cell network. And that's a big deal because in the past you would have to pick, as you're setting up the camera, you'd have to pick basically either Verizon or AT&T for the camera to identify and link to. Now the camera chooses for itself which is the strongest cell carrier, and it connects to that. So that should give you some more options on where you can hang it. They also improve the sensor. They improve their antenna design, so it's more durable and easier to pack. And then, kind of along the lines of what I was talking before, they're offering a live, well, I shouldn't say live because it's not. They're offering an on-demand video feature. So you can go into your app, select your camera, and on that camera, you can request a live video feed, and it will shoot you a 20-second video, from the moment that you request. But the before you get too excited about that, or too, depending on how you view the live thing, too scared about it, I found that there was a pretty significant delay using this. So there's like a 4 to maybe 6 minute delay of the time that I would request a live video to the time that it would actually arrive back to me in the app. And Tacticam is smart. They didn't market this as live. They're saying it's on demand, which is true. That's what it is. But it is edging up closer to that live kind of feature.
Yeah. And real quick, so when you request on demand with that, when did the video recording actually start? Was that also delayed by a few minutes, or would it actually start recording in real time and it just delayed when it arrived to you?
Man, that's a good question. It's hard to tell just because the slight timing differences on my phone versus the app. There's just like a couple minute. I don't know that what I should say is I don't know that the clock on my phone app is perfectly synced to the clock on the trail camera. But my sense is that it was delayed, that the video was actually delayed. I could test this, just go out. In fact, I will have to do this now that you bring it up. Thanks for making some more work for me, Natalie. I thought I was done testing, but yeah, what I'll have to do is I'll have to get out there, stand in front of the camera for a live feed at the moment that I request it, and then leave the frame and see if it captures me or not.
Yeah. Yeah. And it I don't know, I'm just thinking about say you see a deer headed somewhere towards your camera or whatever, you're on the road and you're like, man, I want to see that deer walk by. Or some other scenario like this. I'm not saying you're hunting, but yeah, it would just be curious to see the degree to which you can get close to a live recording. Okay, but I digress.
Let's save this conversation because I've thought of all kinds of devious and semi-devious ways that a hunter could use live for hunting purposes in the field. But
totally,
let's not talk about them yet.
Yeah. Okay. What other cameras are you excited about?
Okay, so the other one is the Moultrie Edge, which they're introducing the 2.0 of their Edge cell cam this year. And the reason why this trail camera is remarkable to me is just because it's so affordable. You can get a 2-pack of these Edge cameras, like the original Edge. You can get a 2-pack of Edge cameras for $136 right now. And these are really useful, reliable cameras. They did great in the walkthrough test. I've run them for 2 years now in the field. They've always worked. Just some minor update glitches with them, but nothing catastrophic, nothing that couldn't be fixed. And Moultrie has the best, most powerful app of any cell cams that I've used. What's cool about their app is it does a really good job of sorting your images for you. Like if you want to only isolate buck photos, it can do that. If you want to only see deer photos, it can do that. But it can also show you, beyond just the photos themselves, it will show you activity from a certain camera based on filters that you choose. So say that I have a camera hung on a cornfield and I want to just see at what times historically deer have been going by that camera. I can set a date range and filter for species, and it will show me a bar graph of activity based on time of when deer are hitting that field. Or if I have years of that data, I can look at, okay, I just want to see in October 2023 when deer were hitting that camera, what dates I was getting activity on that camera for this year. You can filter all sorts of different interesting options that could be really useful for you as a hunter. And that it's kind of like, what I like about this is it's historical data, right? So it helps you kind of learn your area and the deer that you're hunting. It helps you learn more about them over time. The longer you have the camera out, the more trail cam work you do, the better overall data you have, and you can start to learn patterns on the property that you hunt. That could be used, that could effectively be used for better success while hunting.
Yeah. And to your point, right, this app, it's not just time of day. You can drill down into like moon phase and temperature and barometric pressure. Like you can really nerd out on the different filters to try and identify patterns. Is that right?
Yes. You can nerd out as much as you want if you care about moon phase, which you should not. But if you do, you can.
Our readers still do. It doesn't matter how much we write about. It doesn't matter. People still care. There's a filter for it because people care.
Okay. So do you want to hear the potentially scary part about this Moultrie app, though?
Definitely.
I shouldn't say scary. It's not that scary, but it's like it's going to raise an eyebrow for some folks. What they're going to start doing is they're going to take incoming like think of all the photos that these cameras are gathering just as data points. They're just individual data points. Well, they're going to start aggregating data from all of the Moultrie cameras out there. And for your area, say whatever, let's just make up a 200 square mile or a 200 mile radius of around you. It will gather all of the data from all of the Moultrie edge cameras and aggregate them to provide a deer activity predictor. So rather than just running off the data that you've gathered on your own property, it's taking an aggregate of all the Moultrie cameras in your area and making basically a predictive model for when deer activity might be better or less good.
I think that's scary. I think that's maybe a little scary. Is this a forecast, not like a real-time heat map, what they're proposing?
Yeah, exactly. It's like it's like those old school game activity charts.
Okay.
But of saying like at this time, on this day at this time, deer activity will be good. But rather than using, kind of like the magical moon phase thing, they're using real data points captured by trail cameras and then aggregated to a specific area. So, it has the potential to be, I think it actually has the potential to be legit.
Yeah.
But I think what keeps it from actually being scary is that it's a pretty general suggestion, right? Like deer activity is going to be good at this time. Okay, that might be encouraging to you if you're considering hunting at that time, but it's not like, okay, Natalie, the buck you're trying to kill is going to be at this coordinate, based on our projections. So you better be out there at 4:30 p.m. It's not doing that.
We'll be right back after the break.
The next one that's definitely worth talking about is Stealth Cam's Revolver, which is a 360 camera. So it's just like, I don't know, imagine the size of it's about the size of like a medium-sized thermos, but it has a revolving camera lens that shoots in 360 degrees. So this is like the perfect camera if you wanted to set it somewhere, in a field somewhere where you're not totally sure that the deer are going to come from this side, because deer could come from any direction, that camera will trigger. What I'm trying to say is that camera will trigger from any direction. And one interesting feature about it is, let's say like a deer comes from the north and that camera will fire. You have the option to set it to fire in a 360-degree view. So even though it was triggered from the north, you're going to get a photo from the south. So that's pretty useful if you think about, well, one, just like rut behavior. You might have deer nearby kind of congregating in an area, but not necessarily triggering the camera. So if there's any deer even far out there, you're going to get a picture of them when that camera triggers. And then it's also useful in that you're going to get the full kind of panoramic scene for when that deer walked by. You know, you won't have to guess like, oh, was that deer like running from coyotes or something? Or, you know, was that doe being chased by a buck? Like, you're going to get the full view of the scene that is playing out in front of your camera, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah. And do you, with that type of lens, have you noticed any sacrifice in trigger distance or image quality, or it really managed to wrap everything into a 360-degree camera?
Man, you called it. Yeah, it's the distance. It shoots really nice photos at relatively close distances, but it has a hard time at that 36 yard, 110 feet at that distance. Even when you do get pictures, deer in the distance are kind of hard to, you can tell they're a buck, but it's kind of hard to identify which one they are. One thing that all these cell cameras have is the option to download an HD photo, right? To save data, they don't send HD photos right out of the gate. But if there's a photo that you like and it's like, it looks like a good buck, or it looks like the big 8 or whatever, but I can't really tell, you can download a HD photo and then zoom in and see better. So with this camera, you're just going to have to do that way more often because you kind of can't have it all. Okay.
Should we talk about the ethical implications of all of this stuff about live video?
Yeah, we should. Because I want to just I've had a lot of fun testing trail cameras, and I like getting all the updates on my phone.
Yeah.
And just getting deer pictures all summer long. It's just fun. It's just a fun way to kind of feel like you're hunting, even when, you're just sitting at work. Like while we've been talking, I've gotten a couple updates from a couple of the cameras out there, and out of respect, I have not checked them, but I definitely will when this podcast is over. So I like a lot of things about cell cams, but I do see some ethical issues revolving around fair chase in terms of getting real-time updates from the field and then adapting your hunting strategy to that. So like, I'll give you an example. This would be like the nightmare scenario to me. So you have a bunch of live, like in a few years when this technology is like really ready to go, you have a bunch of live feed trail cameras, and say you're hunting in Texas. So they're all set over bait sites. And in the morning, you just wake up at shooting time and check your 8 different bait sites, get a live feed of each of them, see which one has deer on it, and just drive out to that one, and set up for, a 300-yard shot with your rifle. Like that is not a good use of technology to assist in, what deer hunting should be about. Like I could see maybe a less problematic version of this being like, okay, say you have a food plot or field that you want to hunt, but you're kind of worried about going in there in the afternoon because maybe there are already deer in the field and you don't want to bump them out. Well, if you had your live trail cameras set up properly, you could just demand live feeds from, a few different cameras and ensure that there are no deer in the field before you went and walked in. And that seems kind of less bad to me because it's not, you're using the technology not directly to kill a specific animal. You're just kind of using it to assist you, but you're still like adapting your in the field hunting strategy from like a real time, cellular data point. And you see, I am in no way having unique thoughts about this here. The Boone and Crockett Club in 2022 made kind of their official position statement on cell cam use. And they drew the line somewhat vaguely, but they basically have said that using a trail camera to get real-time data or real-time information to make hunting decisions to kill an animal doesn't meet their standards for a fair chase. So like if you got a picture let's say you got a cell cam picture of a buck up on a ridge, and then you booked it up there to that trail that leads off that ridge and intercepted the buck, a couple hours or say an hour after you got his photo, BNC would say that's not ethical hunting. And I can't really say that I disagree with that, where their line is kind of unclear is their phrasing is, several days. If you make a decision several days after getting a photo. Well, I don't know about that. Like I'll just say how I set up these cameras during the hunting season. I'll set them to send photos once every 24 hours. So I'm not getting, like during the hunting season, I'm not getting real-time updates. I'm getting a batch of photos once every 24 hours. So basically every morning I'll wake up and all the cameras have a fresh roll of photos for me to look at. And, I would be totally lying if I said I didn't use that information to decide where I was going to hunt that day. But all that information is one day old. So it's telling me where deer were yesterday and where deer weren't yesterday. And I think that, like, to me, that feels okay. Others might say that that's still cheating or unethical, but I think that, Craig Doherty, is a really respected deer manager from the Northeast, said that, like he defined fair chase as just that the deer should win most of the time. And I think that is that's a pretty easy way to think about all this stuff. And with my skills and using trail cameras this way, the deer still win most of the time. Most of the time I am not shooting the buck that I'm trying to shoot. So that's why it still passes the ethical or fair chase standards for me.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it, to help you make sense of stuff that's like, it can get so complicated if you really start to drill down between, well, like, is 4 hours okay? Is 6 hours okay? Is like 24 hours okay? By the same token, I'm sure there's plenty of hunters who would say you're being too cautious. You have that information. Why would you not use it if it's available to you?
Hey, can I tell you one more thing here? Just so I'm not on the ethical high horse. One other reason to do the 24-hour send every 24 hours is to save battery life. I don't want, a lot of these cameras are near bedding areas and in places that we try not to go to very often. So I want the batteries to last as long as possible. And if you just set them to send every 24 hours rather than immediately, it does preserve battery life. So, I'm not trying to look down on anyone, but it also just goes to the point of you can use these cameras as an aid to hunting how you're used to hunting, which is reading deer sign and using your gut instincts and, using the woodsmanship that you've learned over the years about, when deer move and how they move in relation to weather and the rut and hunting pressure and all that stuff. No trail camera is going to ever be able to replace that, but you can use them to help you inform all those instincts and knowledge that you've gained over the years, right? On the place we hunt, we're super careful around bedding areas, right? We try not to hunt in them. We try not to let our scent blow into them. We, like, in the off season, we walk the entire property and try to find where buck beds are. We try to, like, really pay close attention to the difference between buck beds and doe beds, and, identify the traditional areas that mature bucks seem to bed. And then we use our trail cameras to, like, try to see when bucks are moving in and out of those bedding areas, and then adapt our hunting strategy around that to try to kill those deer. But we wouldn't be effective with the trail cameras if we didn't do all that other work,
Totally.
So yeah, there's a bit of a defense for trail cameras there.
Yeah. And I mean, by the same token, they're a tool that can be useful, but they can also sometimes, I don't want to say trip you up, but they're not always an advantage. Sometimes they can be a disadvantage, right?
100%. I think they're the biggest disadvantage if you only believe what you see on trail camera. And this is also not an original thought. I've had other better, more experienced deer hunters tell me the same thing. Like, trail cameras do not, even that 360, that badass stealth cams 360 revolver, like, it's not going to it's not going to tell the full story of what's going on in that area. It's not going to capture every deer that walks by it. And I know that from testing, because there's plenty of times where you can walk right by a camera and it will not fire. And the other thing too is, I really believe that mature bucks figure out how to avoid trail cameras. And I see this, one, in just the pictures. Like, this is a fun thing to do early in the season. You can see how many deer you're spooking with your trail cameras. Like, set a trail cam in a new spot and set it to burst mode, so it will shoot like 5 photos, just boom, 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 boom. Or you can also do it in video mode too. And you will see the deer's reaction. And the first photo is kind of looking at the camera. Its ears kind of perked up. And then the next photo, its head's back, like, oh, what is that? And it's like ready to blow out of there. And then the next frame will be no deer. It's gone. And then you probably won't see photos of that buck on that camera again for at least the rest of the week. So they know that cameras are out there. And I had one really good anecdote from Shane Simpson, who's this big, really well-known Midwestern blood trailing deer tracker, right? So he's the guy that if you hit a deer badly and you need help tracking it, you call him and he brings his dog out and helps you blood trail it and find the deer. And he's had stories where he's blood trailing a wounded buck. So he knows, his dog is right on the blood trail and he knows where that deer has walked. And it will be heading down a trail that will go right past the trail camera. But then the buck veers off the trail and goes around the backside of the trail camera and then gets back on the trail and keeps going. So,
yeah.
They figure it out.
Yeah. I mean, while wounded, no less. Like, it's got other things to worry about, and it's still got the presence of mind to be aware of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like you and I stopping at the crosswalk, it just knows as it moves through its day how to avoid things that are, scary to it. And, another thing about testing the cameras is doing the walkthrough test. Almost all cameras, not all, but almost all cameras, when they trigger a photo, the shutter, I'm trying to say shutter. Help me out, Natalie. You're the camera expert.
When the shutter makes a sound?
Yes, there is a sound. And it's pretty easy to hear at 10 feet. And sometimes you can even hear it at that 60-foot mark. So if I can hear that, like, for sure a deer can. So you're creating noise out in the field where a deer's not used to it, and you've touched the camera, so there's scent on it, and it's just I don't think it's the flash or the red glow or the no glow. I don't think that's what the deer are seeing. I think they're hearing the shutter firing, and I think they're smelling our scent on the cameras, and that's what spooks them off a camera. Is my theory.
Okay, well, I mean, that balance sounds about right. We can continue to dream up all this technology, and it's still only as useful as we make it.
Yeah. And it's just like anything else. You cannot be that good at using trail cameras. Like when I first started doing this, it was comically bad at how few photos and how poor a photo quality I was getting. Like in Minnesota and Wisconsin, we can't put out bait or minerals or anything to concentrate deer. Even in the off season, a lot of folks will do that to just kind of get deer in front of cameras. We can't do anything like that. So everything has to be natural, natural food sources or on trails or on scrapes or, areas where you can get deer kind of concentrated, but also where you can get deer to hang out for a little bit so you can really get decent photos and video of them. It's a skill in itself. If you think that you can just buy a bunch of cell cams, hang them at random places, hang them in fields where you expect deer to come out and then go shoot a big, huge buck based on trail camera photos, it's significantly harder than that.
Yeah. Well, so what's changed with your strategy? What have you gotten better at specifically?
One, I've gotten better at paying attention to the settings. It makes a big difference. The settings that you put into the camera, which with cell cams now, it's all done over your phone. And in the past, in the beginning, I would always kind of gravitate toward the most sensitive capture setting because I'm like, oh, I don't want to miss any photos. Well, then you just end up getting, hundreds of images of waving grass or, birds off in the distance. And all that starts to become unuseful. And it actually kind of hurts, a lot of bad data coming in is sometimes more detrimental than getting no data. So figuring out the settings, you don't have to go on the lightest setting. Understanding that, the kind of the prime range for trail cameras is really about 10 yards. Any farther away, I would say maybe 10 to 15 yards. Any farther away, it can be hard to get good nighttime photos of moving deer. And any closer, you end up getting a lot of like photos of backs, and you end up getting a lot of photos of deer just on the very edge of the frame. So I would say, kind of maximizing cameras so that they shoot like the key crossing is at, 10 to 15 yards has helped a lot. And then also not being too caught up about the whole, like, don't face it east-west. Like, I think that's still kind of true if you're in a really open area and the sun will be setting like directly at your camera. But if you're in the woods, or even if you're in a small food plot or something where you're going to have some shade and you're not getting direct rising sunlight or direct setting sun shooting straight at the camera, now the cameras are good enough that really doesn't distort the images too much. It might not be like some beautiful National Geographic shot, but you're going to be able to tell which buck it is, So not getting too hung up about that old tip of like, don't hang your camera facing east or west. And then just also knowing the limitations, like foggy nighttime, when it's foggy at night, your photos, there's no camera that's going to shoot good photos. So like if there's some place around a swamp and you want to get like early season photos of deer coming, that's not going to work. It's going to be foggy every morning. So don't try to get pictures there if you're trying to get like those early morning photos, because every morning there's going to be fog coming off that swamp in the summertime and you're not going to get pictures. So don't, move your camera somewhere else. Yeah, just stuff like that you learn after a couple years of messing up.
Did you finally throw in the towel on your swamp camera this year?
No, it's out there. There's a couple swamp cameras out there. I just know that they're not going to be very functional first thing in the morning when it's foggy.
Okay. Well, is there anything else we should talk about or I should ask that we haven't covered?
I don't think so. I think, well, actually there, the last kind of point about this is, there are new regulations and sort of looming regulations around trail camera use. Some of the restrictions are, some states limit trail camera use to private land only. Some like Kansas, for example, they banned trail camera use on public lands. Some states like Montana banned trail camera use during the hunting season. And I think as, live cameras become more prevalent and more effective, I think some states will be banning live trail cam technology. So, I think some of that probably needs to happen. But on the other hand, I really I believe that cellular trail cameras as they are now are mostly and can be used ethically in the future and have a place in deer hunting for sure. And I hope that we've kind of, just as a deer hunting community, we've kind of are happy with what we have and don't want to push technology too much farther at the risk of seeing more bans in places that, people have gotten used to using cell cams. Like Iowa, for example, there was a bunch of TikTok videos and YouTube commentary about Iowa banning the use of cell cams during this, the 2024 hunting season, which would be a huge deal. That turns out that that's not happening and that they're going to kind of review and revise the specific wording around trail camera use. But stuff like that is on the table. So it's cool technology and it's fun to use. And I love getting deer pictures as much as anyone. But we do have to show some self-restraint here. Otherwise, the stuff is going to get banned during hunting seasons and we're not going to be able to use it.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for testing all the trail cameras, Alex, and giving us the rundown. And you should probably get back to testing them. See what else is out there.
Happy to do it. I'm going to go see what photos came in as soon as I hang up.
The Outdoor Life podcast is edited by Mike Pedersen of 85 Audio. It's normally hosted by our editor-in-chief, Alex Robinson, but today he wanted to geek out about trail cameras. You can read his full test of trail cams at outdoorlife.com/trailcamtest. That's outdoorlife.com/trailcamtest. The podcast is produced by me, executive editor Natalie Krebs. Music in this episode was composed and performed by Pierre Locatelli via APM Music.